The radio crackled with 3 words that would change everything. "Send help now." Static swallowed the rest, but those 3 words hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody could see. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the Syrian border, 4 Navy SEALs were dying, and the only person who heard their call was a woman the world believed handed out water bottles to refugees. Linnea Vashchenko set down her coffee and listened. The emergency frequency she monitored every night, the one she was never supposed to have access to, erupted again with fragmented desperation. Ronan Bellamy, lieutenant commander, was speaking in the clipped tones of a man who knew he was running out of time. Pinned at grid reference 742. Forti plus hostile. 2 wounded. No extraction timeline. Anyone on this frequency, we need immediate support. Before we continue with what happened next, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone whose quiet courage saved others when no one was watching. The NGO compound where Linnea had spent the last 4 months sat 12 kilometers from the kill zone. 12 kilometers of militia checkpoints, IED-laden roads, and darkness so complete that even the stars seemed afraid to shine. She knew the terrain because she had walked every inch of it during her humanitarian cover work. She knew it because walking terrain was what her father had taught her before she could ride a bicycle. Her hands moved without conscious thought. She crossed the small room she called home, bare concrete walls decorated with nothing but a calendar from the Refugee Assistance Program. Her fingers found the loose tile beneath her cot. The tile lifted to reveal a space that should not have existed in an aid worker's quarters. Inside lay a rifle case, a tactical vest, a handgun, ammunition, and a satellite phone that connected to exactly 1 number in Langley, Virginia. The voice on the radio grew more strained. Deshawn, she thought. The communications specialist. She had memorized the team roster 6 weeks ago when they inserted into the region, back when her actual job was to provide intelligence support from a safe distance. That distance had just collapsed. Okafor is hit, Deshawn reported. Shoulder wound, bleeding controlled, but he needs evac. Brennan is running low on ammunition. Vance is holding the eastern wall, but they are probing every 30 seconds. Whoever planned this knew exactly where we would be. Linnea opened the rifle case. The weapon inside was a thing of brutal elegance, a precision instrument capable of reaching out across impossible distances to deliver consequences. She had not fired it in 4 months. She had hoped she would never fire it again. Her satellite phone buzzed. Marcus Chen's voice came through before she could speak. "I am monitoring the same frequency. Extract assets are 45 minutes out at minimum. Probably longer." "They do not have 45 minutes, Linnea said. "I know." There was weight in those 2 words, the weight of a handler who understood what his operative was about to do and could not officially sanction it. The agency cannot authorize unilateral action. You understand what I am saying. She understood perfectly. He was telling her that if she went alone. No backup, no support, no official existence. If she died out there, she would be nothing more than an unfortunate aid worker caught in the wrong place. Linnea began loading magazines with practiced efficiency. How did they get burned? Bad intelligence, Marcus said. Someone fed them a target that did not exist. Led them straight into a prepared ambush. She paused. Prepared ambushes required preparation. They required knowledge of the team's insertion point, their timeline, their route. They required a source with access to American operational planning. Who is running the opposition? Silence on the line. Then Marcus spoke a name that made her blood cool by several degrees. Kadir Razavi. Quds Force. He has been hunting American assets in the region for 2 years. Smart, patient, and extremely motivated. Linnea resumed loading. She knew Razavi's file. Oxford educated. Fluent in English. Lost a brother in a strike 2 years ago. The kind of man who played chess while others played checkers, who set traps months in advance and waited for prey to wander in. The SEALs had wandered into his trap. Now they were dying in it. She pulled on the tactical vest, checker sidearm, and slung the rifle across her back. The woman who left the NGO compound looked nothing like the humanitarian worker who had arrived 4 months ago. That woman had soft eyes and an easy smile. This woman had the flat gaze of someone who had made a decision that could not be unmade. Outside, the night pressed close. No moon, no artificial light for miles. Perfect conditions for someone who had learned to navigate by stars and memory. 12 kilometers. 40 hostile fighters. For men she had never met, but whose voices she would carry with her into the dark. The math was impossible. The odds were laughable. Linnea Vashchenko stepped off the compound and began to run. Behind her, the radio crackled one more time. Deschamps' voice, barely a whisper now. If anyone can hear this, please. We are out of options. She could not answer. Not yet. Not until she was close enough to answer with something other than words. The desert swallowed her whole, and somewhere in the distance, a man named Kadir Razavi had no idea that the ghost he had been hunting for 2 years was finally coming for him. The first kilometer was the most dangerous. Linnea knew the militia maintained a checkpoint 400 meters from the NGO compound. 2 bored young men with Kalashnikovs who spent most nights smoking cigarettes and arguing about football. She had smiled at them dozens of times during daylight supply runs. Tonight, she gave them a wide berth, cutting through a drainage ditch that smelled of things she refused to identify. Her father's voice lived in her head during moments like this. Slow is smooth, Linnea. Smooth is fast. Viktor Vashchenko had defected from Soviet Special Forces 3 years before she was born, trading everything he knew for a small ranch in Montana and a chance to raise his daughter in a country that would not send her to die in someone else's war. The irony of where she had ended up was not lost on her. She cleared the checkpoint sightline and picked up her pace. The terrain here was broken, rocky, perfect for twisted ankles and ambushes. She moved through it like water, finding cracks in stone, each footfall placed with the precision her father had drilled into her before she turned 10. You have a gift, he used to say, watching her shoot cans off fence posts at distances that made the neighboring ranchers nervous. A gift is also a responsibility. You must decide what you will use it for. She had decided at 19, walking into a CIA recruitment office the week after her father's funeral. Heart attack, the doctors said. His heart had simply stopped, as if the organ that pumped blood had finally grown tired of carrying secrets. She buried him on the ranch and then drove away without looking back. The memory faded as she crested a small rise and dropped flat against the earth. Voices ahead. Arabic, local dialect, 3 distinct speakers. She controlled her breathing and listened. They were discussing the ambush, celebrating it. The Americans walked right into it. One said, Razavi promised us they would, and they did. Like lambs to slaughter. Laughter. The sound of men who believed they had already won. Linnea waited. Patience was another gift her father had given her, the understanding that rushing led to dying, and dying helped no one. The patrol moved on after 7 minutes, their voices fading into the darkness. She rose and continued. Her earpiece crackled softly. Marcus again. Satellite imagery shows a significant force concentration around the target compound. I count at least 40 fighters in fixed positions with another 20 in reserve. They have technical vehicles with mounted weapons covering the main approach. She processed the information without breaking stride. What about the Western Ridge? Minimal coverage. Razavi seems to believe no one would approach from that direction. It is a 4-hour climb in daylight. Then it is a 2-hour climb tonight. Linnea, Marcus said, and something in his voice made her slow. Even if you reach a firing position, you are 1 person against 60. The math does not work. She thought about Deschamps' voice on the radio, the desperation that crept in around the edges of his professional calm. She thought about Petty Officer Okafor bleeding in a destroyed compound, about young Brennan counting his remaining rounds, about Senior Chief Vance holding a wall against men who kept coming. The math never works, she said. We do it anyway. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then, I will keep the channel open. If you need extraction coordinates for yourself, say the word Cardinal, and I will have assets redirect to your position. She would not use that word. They both knew it. The terrain grew steeper as she approached the ridgeline. Her thighs burned and her lungs worked harder in the thin night air, but her pace never faltered. Somewhere behind those hills, for men were waiting for help that official channels said could not come in time. A memory surfaced unbidden. She was 12 years old, sitting on the porch with her father as the Montana sun painted the mountains gold. He was cleaning his rifle, the one he had carried out of the Soviet Union, the one that now rested against her back. "Papa," she had asked, "why did you leave your country?" His hands had stilled on the weapon. "Because I was ordered to do something I could not do, little wolf. I was ordered to kill people who had done nothing wrong. People who only wanted to be free." He looked at her with eyes that held depth she would not understand until years later. A man must know what he will die for. More importantly, he must know what he will not kill for. When you know those two things, you know who you are. She had not fully understood then. She understood now. The ridge appeared before her, a dark mass blocking out the stars on the horizon. 2 hours of climbing lay ahead, and at the top waited an impossible situation. 60 fighters, 4 SEALs, one woman with a rifle and a set of skills she had spent her whole life pretending she did not possess. Linnea began to climb. The rock was cold beneath her fingers, sharp in places where it had fractured into edges that could slice through tactical gloves. She found handholds by touch and memory, pulling herself upward inch by inch. Below her, the desert floor fell away into absolute darkness. Halfway up, her radio captured a fragment of SEAL communication. They had switched to a secondary frequency, standard protocol, when they suspected the primary was compromised. Bellamy was talking, his Boston accent flattened by exhaustion. "We hold until dawn. If no support by sunrise, we attempt breakout to the south." Another voice, older and rougher. "Vance, breakout through 60 fighters with 2 wounded. That is suicide, Lieutenant Commander. I am open to alternatives, Senior Chief." Silence. There were no alternatives. They all knew it. Linnea climbed faster. The top of the ridge came into view as the first gray light touched the eastern horizon. She pulled herself over the final edge and lay flat, breathing hard, allowing herself 30 seconds of recovery before she moved to the overlook. What she saw made her stomach tighten. The kill box was worse than she had imagined. A destroyed compound in a valley floor, surrounded on 3 sides by elevated positions bristling with fighters. She could see the muzzle flashes of suppressing fire, could see the technical vehicles Marcus had mentioned, could see the methodical way Razovy had arranged his forces to ensure nothing escaped. And there in the center, pinned behind crumbling walls, 4 men waited to die. Linnea unslung her rifle and began to calculate. Lieutenant Commander Ronan Bellamy had made exactly 1 mistake in his 15-year career, and now 4 men were going to die because of it. He pressed his back against the crumbling wall and listened to the bullets chew through concrete above his head. The intelligence had been perfect. Too perfect. You should have seen it. Across the compound, Senior Chief Garrett Vance held the eastern approach with the calm efficiency of a man who had been in worse situations and survived them all. The difference was that in those situations, there had always been a way out. A helicopter, an extraction team, something. Here there was only rock and sand and 60 men who wanted them dead. Bellamy crawled to where Deshaun Okafor sat propped against a support beam, his shoulder wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. "How are you holding up?" Deshaun managed a weak smile. "Been better, sir. Radio is still operational. I have been broadcasting on every frequency I can think of. So far nothing but static and 1 very confused French cargo pilot. Keep trying." Milo Brennan slid into position beside them, his young face streaked with dust and sweat. "Sir, I am down to 3 magazines. Vance says he has 4. At this rate of fire, we have maybe 2 hours before we're throwing rocks." Bellamy did not respond. There was nothing to say. The math was the math, and the math said they were going to die in this compound before the sun reached its peak. A burst of automatic fire raked their position, and all 3 men pressed flat against the ground. When it stopped, Vance's voice carried across the compound. "They are testing the southern wall now, probing for weakness. Whoever is running this show knows what he is doing." Bellamy knew who was running it. Kadir Razovy. The name had come through on a fragmentary intelligence update 2 days ago, a warning that the Iranian commander was operating in the area. Bellamy had dismissed it as routine threat assessment. Now, that dismissal was going to cost 4 American lives. The sun climbed higher, and with it came the heat. By noon, the compound would be an oven, sapping their strength and clouding their judgment. Razavi knew this. Razavi was counting on it. The man could simply wait and let the environment do half his work for him. "Sir," Deshawn's voice was strange. "I am picking up something on the emergency frequency. Very faint. Someone is out there." Bellamy felt a spark of hope he immediately tried to suppress. "Patch it through." Static filled his earpiece, then a voice so quiet he could barely make it out. A woman's voice, speaking in clipped professional tones. "Asset in position. Western Ridge. Observing 60 plus hostile. For friendlies confirmed in Central Compound. Beginning assessment." Bellamy's blood went cold. Western Ridge was a 2-hour climb in daylight, longer at night. Whoever this woman was, she had crossed 12 kilometers of hostile territory and scaled a mountain in darkness to reach them. That was not standard military capability. That was something else entirely. "Who the hell is that?" Vance demanded, having caught the transmission. "I do not know," Bellamy admitted. Vance's laugh was bitter. "Great. So our rescue is one person, one woman, from the sound of it, against 60 fighters. We are saved." Bellamy wanted to argue, but he could not fault the senior chief's assessment. The numbers were impossible. One shooter, no matter how skilled, could not change the fundamental equation of their situation. The woman's voice came again. "I count 42 fighters in fixed positions, 12 in mobile reserve, 6 technical vehicles with mounted weapons. Command element appears to be in the school building 400 meters northeast of your position. I have clear sight lines to approximately 60% of hostile forces." Deshawn was staring at his radio with something like wonder. "Sir, she is not just observing. She is calculating firing solutions. She's going to get herself killed," Vance growled. "One rifle against all of that? It is suicide." Bellamy thought about the voice, the calm, the precision of her observations. Whoever she was, she did not sound like someone who had come here to die. She sounded like someone who had done this before. He keyed his radio. "Unknown asset, this is Trident 1. Identify yourself and your intentions." A pause. Then, "Trident 1, you can call me Wraith. My intentions are to create an extraction corridor and get your team out of that kill box. I need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly." Vance snorted. "Trust her? We do not even know who she is. She could be anyone. This could be another trap." It was a valid concern. Razavi had already demonstrated he could manipulate intelligence. Why not communications as well? Why not lure them into exposing themselves with false hope? But Bellamy had heard something in the woman's voice, something that reminded him of operators he had known, men and women who walked into impossible situations because someone had to. She had not asked for anything. She had not demanded recognition or promised miracles. She had simply stated what she intended to do and asked for their cooperation. "Wraith," he said, "we are listening." The response was immediate. "Good. In approximately 3 minutes, I am going to start reducing the hostile force. When you hear the first shot, I need your team to cease all fire and take hard cover. Do not engage. Do not draw attention. Let them focus on finding me. The longer they look in my direction, the longer you stay alive." "And then what?" Vance demanded. "Then I keep shooting until there is a path out of that valley, or until I am out of ammunition. Whichever comes first." Brennan looked at Bellamy with something desperate in his eyes. "Sir, she is really going to do this. One person against all of them." Bellamy stared at the ridge line, invisible in the morning glare. Somewhere up there, a woman he had never met was about to start a war on their behalf. He did not know her name, her organization, or her reasons. He only knew that she had come when no one else would. "Wraith," he said quietly, "we will be ready." The radio went silent. The compound went silent. Even the enemy guns seemed to pause, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Then, from 800 meters away, a single shot echoed across the valley, and the first hostile fighter crumpled to the ground. Kadir Razavi heard the shot and knew immediately that something had changed. He stood at the window of the abandoned school building, watching his men swarm toward the source of the gunfire, and felt the first cold touch of uncertainty he had experienced in months. The trap had been perfect. 6 weeks of planning, 3 compromised intelligence sources, and 1 irresistible target dangled in front of American Special Operations Command. The SEALs had walked into his kill box exactly as predicted, and by sunset they would be dead. Their bodies would be displayed as proof that American military power meant nothing in this part of the world. But that shot had come from the Western Ridge. 800 meters, a distance that required either extraordinary luck or extraordinary skill, and Razavi did not believe in luck. He turned to his lieutenant, a scarred man named Farzan who had fought beside him for a decade. "Who do we have on the western approach?" Farzan checked his radio. 2 observation posts. Both report no contact, no movement. One of them is wrong, or dead. Razavi picked up his binoculars and scanned the ridgeline. Nothing visible. Whoever had taken that shot knew how to remain hidden after firing. That required discipline, training, the kind of expertise that did not arrive by accident. A second shot echoed across the valley. Another of his fighters dropped, this one manning a technical vehicle near the southern perimeter. The men around the vehicle scattered like startled birds, spraying automatic fire toward the ridge in panic. Razavi watched them waste ammunition on empty rocks and felt contempt mix with his growing concern. "Discipline," he shouted into his radio. "Hold fire until you have a target. Conserve ammunition." The firing stopped, but the damage was done. 2 men dead in 30 seconds, and his force had revealed their positions while the shooter remained invisible. Farzan appeared at his shoulder. "Commander, should we advance on the ridge?" Razavi considered the question. A direct assault would cost lives, potentially many lives, against a shooter with elevation advantage and clear sight lines. But leaving the sniper in place meant a slow bleeding of his force, 1 precise shot at a time. "No," he said finally. "Bring me Tarek." Farzan's eyes widened slightly. "The patient one? For a single shooter?" "For a shooter who crossed 12 kilometers of our territory without detection, climbed that ridge in darkness, and has now killed 2 of my men from 800 meters. Razavi turned from the window. "This is not a random fighter. This is a professional. Tarek will find them." 5 minutes later, a thin man with the stillness of a hunting cat entered the command post. Tarek al-Rashid had earned his nickname through a career that spanned 3 conflicts and an estimated 47 confirmed kills. He never rushed. He never panicked. He simply waited until his target made a mistake, and then he ended them. "There's a sniper on the western ridge," Razavi told him. "I need them eliminated." Tarek nodded once, his dark eyes already distant with calculation. "Weapon? Unknown. Likely a precision rifle. 7.62 or larger based on the sound signature. I will need 2 hours to reach a counterposition." Tarek's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Keep your men under cover until then. Every fighter who exposes himself is a gift to whoever is up there." He left without waiting for a response, gathering his rifle and disappearing into the maze of buildings that surrounded the school. Razavi returned to the window. 2 more shots had sounded while he spoke with Tarek, 2 more of his men dead. The shooter was methodical, patient, choosing targets that maximize disruption while minimizing risk of detection. This was not suppressive fire or harassment. This was systematic elimination. A memory surfaced, unbidden. 2 years ago, a strike had killed his brother Mahmoud during a meeting that should have been secret. The intelligence that led to that strike had come from somewhere, from someone who knew things they should not have known. Razavi had spent months hunting for the source, following threads that led nowhere, chasing ghosts through a wilderness of mirrors. The American ghost, his informants called the phantom responsible. A woman, some said, though none could confirm it. She moved through the region like smoke, gathering secrets and disappearing before anyone could catch her. Razavi stared at the ridge line and wondered if his ghost had finally materialized. In the compound below, the SEALs had gone silent. No return fire, no movement, exactly as the sniper had instructed them. They were placing their lives in the hands of whoever was on that ridge, trusting a voice on the radio over the evidence of their own eyes. "Commander," Farzan again, his face troubled. "The men are asking questions. They want to know why we are not advancing on the Americans while we have them trapped." "Because the trap has changed," Razavi said quietly. "We are no longer the hunters. Someone is hunting us." Another shot. Another body. The morning sun climbed higher, and Razavi felt time slipping through his fingers like sand. "Whoever you are," he murmured toward the distant ridge, "I will find you. I will learn your name. And before this day ends, I will watch you die." On the western ridge, Linnea Vashchenko chambered another round and sighted her fifth target. The enemy was adapting, taking cover, reducing their exposure. Good tactics, but not good enough. She had counted 60 fighters at dawn. Now there were 55. In 2 hours, when Razavi's countersniper reached his position, she would need to have reduced that number significantly further. The scope settled on a fighter attempting to reposition between two buildings. He thought he was hidden. He was wrong. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. 54. The bullet struck the rock 3 inches from Linnea's head, spraying fragments across her cheek before she could register the sound of the shot. She rolled left on instinct, abandoning her position and pressing flat against the earth behind a limestone outcrop that offered marginally better cover. Countersniper. Fust. She had expected 2 hours based on terrain assessment. The shooter had made it in 90 minutes, which meant he had taken risks or he knew paths she did not. Neither possibility was comforting. She controlled her breathing and listened. The shot had come from the northeast, somewhere on the opposite ridge that flanked the valley. A crossing angle that would have been impossible to defend against if the shooter had been slightly more patient. He had rushed his first shot, eager for the kill. That eagerness had saved her life. It would not save her twice. "Wraith, this is Trident 1. Bellamy's voice crackled in her earpiece. "We heard that shot. Different signature than yours. What is happening up there?" Linnea weighed her response. The SEALs needed hope, but they also needed truth. "I have a countersniper on my position. Professional. He nearly had me. I am relocating." Silence on the channel. Then Vance's gruff voice cut through. "One shooter against 60, and now she has someone hunting her specifically. This just keeps getting better." She ignored the senior chief's pessimism and began crawling backward along the ridge, keeping the limestone between herself and the enemy shooter's last known position. Every movement was calculated, every handhold chosen to minimize sound and visual signature. The patient one, as Razavi had called him, would be repositioning as well, trying to anticipate her next firing point. The game had changed. She was no longer simply eliminating targets. She was fighting a parallel war against someone whose skills might match her own. 51 fighters remained in the valley below. She had killed 9 before the counter-sniper forced her to move. 9 was not enough. 9 would not create an extraction corridor. 9 would not save 4 men who were counting the minutes until their ammunition ran dry. A memory pushed through her concentration, unwanted but insistent. 2 years ago, a different valley, a different country, but the same calculus of lives and death. She had identified a meeting of high-value targets, had provided intelligence that could have ended a network responsible for dozens of American deaths. Her handler at the time, a man named Westcott, had delayed action pending additional confirmation. The confirmation came too late. The targets dispersed. The network survived. 3 weeks later, that network executed an ambush that killed 8 Marines. Linnea had never forgiven herself for not pushing harder, for not finding a way to make Westcott listen. She had trusted the system, and the system had failed. 8 families received folded flags because she followed protocol instead of her instincts. She would not make that mistake again. The ridge curved westward, offering a secondary position that would give her new sight lines into the valley. She moved toward it with painful slowness, aware that the patient one was somewhere on the opposite ridge, his scope sweeping for any sign of movement. Trident 1, she transmitted, "I need a distraction." Controlled fire toward the eastern perimeter. Nothing sustained, just enough to draw attention away from the ridges. Another pause. Then Bellamy, Copy that, Wraith. Give us 30 seconds. She counted in her head, using the time to settle into her new position. The limestone here was darker, better camouflage for the barrel of her rifle. She had perhaps 3 shots before she would need to move again. Automatic fire erupted from the compound below. The SEALs were executing her request, sending short bursts toward the Eastern fighters. It was a risk, expending precious ammunition, but the gamble paid off. She watched enemy heads turn toward the compound, attention shifting away from the ridges. Linnea found a target. A fighter manning one of the technical vehicles, his body momentarily exposed as he leaned forward to track the gunfire. She squeezed the trigger and watched him fall. 50. She chambered another round and found her next target before the first body had finished crumpling. A man sprinting between cover positions, silhouetted against the morning sun. She led him by 2 feet and fired. 49. The third shot was the dangerous one. By now the patient one would have marked her muzzle flash, would be adjusting his position to get an angle on her new location. She had seconds at most. She found a cluster of 3 fighters sharing cover behind a low wall. Poor tactical spacing. Her bullet took the first one through the throat, and the other 2 scattered in opposite directions. 48. She rolled away from her position just as another round cracked through the space she had occupied. Closer this time. The patient one was learning her patterns, anticipating her movements. He was not just skilled, he was adaptive. In the compound below, Deshaun Okafor was fading. Bellamy could see it in the pallor of the communications specialist's skin, in the way his responses came slower with each passing hour. The shoulder wound was not immediately fatal, but blood loss and shock were taking their toll. Sir, Brennan said quietly, crouching beside him. She has killed 12 of them. 12. One person. Bellamy nodded. He had been counting too. 12 enemy fighters eliminated in less than 2 hours, and the woman on the ridge showed no signs of stopping. But he had also heard those near-miss shots, had heard the tension in her voice when she reported the counter-sniper. She was not invincible. She was flesh and blood, alone on a mountain, fighting a war that mathematics said she could not win. What happens if they get her? Brennan asked. The question hung between them like smoke. Then we are back where we started, Bellamy said. Except now, they will be angry. On the ridge, Linnea pressed herself into a crevice barely wide enough for her body and tried to slow her racing heart. The patient one had nearly had her twice now. She was running out of safe positions, running out of time. 48 fighters remained, for SEALs were dying. And somewhere on the opposite ridge, a man with infinite patience was waiting for her to make one fatal mistake. The loudspeaker crackled to life without warning, and a voice filled the valley that made Linnea's blood turn to ice. I know you're up there. The words were English, precise and cultured, carrying the faint trace of an Oxford education. I have been wondering when you would finally show yourself. The American ghost. The woman who moved through shadows and leaves bodies in her wake. Razavi. She recognized the voice from intelligence briefings, from hours of recorded intercepts she had studied while building the case that led to his brother's death. He sounded almost pleased, as if her presence was a gift he had been waiting to unwrap. My men have been hunting you for 2 years, he continued. Every time we get close, you disappear. Every time we set a trap, you slip through. I began to wonder if you were real at all, or simply a story American intelligence invented to frighten us. In the compound below, Bellamy and his team exchanged confused glances. Deshaun, barely conscious now, managed to lift his head. Sir, what is he talking about? Who is she? Bellamy had no answer. He stared at the ridge where their mysterious savior had been methodically eliminating enemy fighters and realized he understood nothing about what was actually happening in this valley. Razavi's voice grew harder. But you made a mistake coming here. You made it personal. Because I know something about you now, Ghost. I know why you came. Linnea felt the words before he spoke them, felt the shape of the revelation forming in the air like a storm about to break. 2 years ago, a strike killed 17 men at a meeting in Qom. Important men, planners, leaders. My brother Mahmoud was among them. He was not a fighter. He was a teacher, a father of 3 children who will never see him again. And the intelligence that led to that strike, the information that told your military exactly where to find us, came from you. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the gunfire had stopped, as if the entire valley was holding its breath. I did not know your name then, Razavi continued. I did not know your face, but I knew you existed. I knew someone had betrayed the location of that meeting, someone with access to sources deep within our networks. I have spent 2 years hunting for you, and now here you are, alone on a mountain, trying to save 4 men who mean nothing in the larger war. Linnea closed her eyes. He was right. Mahmoud Razavi had been collateral damage, a secondary target who happened to be in the wrong room when the missiles arrived. She had flagged him as low priority, a minor academic with tangential connections to the network. She had not known he was Kadir's brother. She had not known his death would create an enemy who would spend years planning revenge. The SEALs were not random targets. This entire operation, the false intelligence, the perfect trap, all of it had been designed to draw her out. Razavi had gambled that she would hear the distress call, that she would not be able to resist trying to help. And she had walked straight into his web. So here's my offer, Ghost. Razavi's tone shifted, becoming almost gentle. Surrender yourself. Walk down from that ridge with your hands raised. Do this, and I will let the Americans leave. They could take their wounded and go. No one else needs to die today. Brennan's voice was barely a whisper. Sir, is he serious? Would he actually let us go? Vance answered before Bellamy could. He is lying. The moment she shows herself, he kills her and then kills us. This is not a negotiation. It is theater. Bellamy knew the senior chief was probably right, but he also saw something in Brennan's eyes, in Deschamps' fading consciousness, that looked dangerously like hope. They wanted to believe there was a way out that did not involve more death. You have 5 minutes to decide, Razavi announced. After that, I will assume you have chosen to continue fighting, and I will instruct my men to advance on the American position with everything we have. Your friends will die badly, Ghost. And it will be your fault. The loudspeaker clicked off. Linnea stared at the compound, where 4 men waited for her decision. She thought about Mahmoud Razavi, about his 3 children who would never know their father. She thought about the 8 Marines who died because she trusted the system instead of acting on her own intelligence. She thought about her father, sitting on a porch in Montana, telling her that a person must know what they will die for. She keyed her radio. Trying 1, this is Wraith. Bellamy responded immediately. We heard everything. What are you going to do? The same thing I've been doing since I got here. I'm going to kill every fighter between you and Extraction until there are none left. He's going to throw everything at us, Bellamy warned. Full assault. We cannot hold against that. You will not have to hold long. Linnea began moving toward a new position, one that would give her overlapping sight lines on the main approach routes. Listen to me carefully. When the assault begins, I need you to collapse your perimeter to the northwestern corner of the compound. Tightest formation possible. Put all your firepower on the southern approach and leave the north to me. The north is where most of them are staged, Vance cut in. You want us to turn our backs on 40 fighters? 36, Linnea corrected. And yes, because in about 4 minutes, those 36 fighters are going to start dying, and they're going to be too busy looking for me to notice you slipping out the back. Silence on the channel. Then Vance spoke again, and something had changed in his voice. Something that sounded almost like respect. Wraith, whoever you are either the bravest person I have ever encountered or the craziest. Linnea settled into her new position and chambered around. Probably both, Senior Chief. Probably both. Below, Razavi raised his hand to signal the assault. 60 seconds remained on his deadline, but he had never intended to wait. The Ghost had made her choice, and now she would watch her precious Americans die before he finally ended her. His hand dropped. The fighters surged forward. And on the ridge above, Linnea Vashchenko exhaled slowly and began to shoot. The first wave came screaming across the valley floor. 30 men spread in a loose formation designed to minimize the effectiveness of a single shooter. It was smart tactics against a conventional sniper. Against Linnea Vashchenko, it simply meant more targets. She fired 4 times in 6 seconds. 4 bodies dropped. The formation wavered as survivors scrambled for cover, their momentum broken before they had crossed half the distance to the compound. Trident 1, hold fire. She kept her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Let them regroup. They will try again in 60 seconds with a different approach. Bellamy acknowledged, and she used the brief respite to scan for the patient 1. He was still out there, still hunting. The assault had not changed that equation. If anything, it had given him better cover to reposition. A flicker of movement on the eastern ridge. There, Tarek had shifted to a position that gave him angle on her likely firing points. Smart, patient, exactly what his nickname promised. She adjusted her position by 3 feet, just enough to break his sight line, while maintaining her own coverage of the valley. The dance continued. The second wave came differently, fighters using the technical vehicles as mobile cover. The mounted guns sprayed suppressive fire toward the ridge, while infantry advanced in the vehicle shadows. Better tactics, more dangerous. Linnea ignored the bullets sparking off rocks around her and focused on the drivers. First Technical lost its driver at 400 meters and veered wildly into a ditch. Second Technical made it another 100 meters before she put a round through the gunner and then the man who tried to take his place. But the third vehicle was different. It had angled away from her primary sight lines, using terrain features she had not accounted for. By the time she acquired it, the fighters it carried were already within grenade range of the compound. Trident 1, you have 6 hostiles approaching your northwestern corner. I do not have a clean shot. Bellamy's response was drowned out by the sound of close-quarters gunfire. The SEALs were engaging, their disciplined bursts cutting through the chaos. She heard Vance bellowing commands, heard Brennan's younger voice calling out targets. Then she heard something that made her stomach clench. Deshawn is hit again. Brennan's voice cracked with panic. He is not responding. I need to get him to better cover. Negative. Bellamy was shouting now. Brennan, stay in position. You move, and you expose the whole team. Sir, he is dying. Linnea made a decision that violated every principle of sound tactical judgment. She broke cover and sprinted along the ridge line, abandoning her carefully chosen position for one that gave her angle on the northwestern approach. The patient 1 would see her. She was counting on it. The gamble paid off in blood. She dropped 2 of the 6 fighters threatening the compound before Tarek's bullet tore through her left arm. The impact spun her sideways, and she hit the ground hard, her rifle clattering against stone. Pain exploded from shoulder to fingertips, hot and electric. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out and forced herself to assess the damage. Through and through, missing the bone. Functional but compromised. She could still shoot, but her accuracy would suffer. Rafe, report. Bellamy's voice was urgent. We heard that shot. Are you hit? She retrieved her rifle with her right hand and pressed her back against a boulder. Flesh wound. I am still operational. A lie, but a necessary one. The SEALs needed to believe she was invincible. They needed hope more than they needed truth. The remaining 4 fighters near the compound had gone aground, pinned between the SEALs' defensive fire and fear of the sniper, who had already killed half their assault team. Stalemate, but a temporary one. Rafe. A new voice on the radio. Brennan. I moved Deshawn. He is stable for now, but he needs real medical attention soon. Hours, not days. Linnea closed her eyes and calculated. 29 fighters remained in the valley. The patient 1 still held his position on the eastern ridge. Razavi had not committed his reserve force yet, which meant the next assault would be worse. Brennan, she said, how old are you? A pause. 24. Why? Because I need you to do something for me, and I need to know you are old enough to understand why it matters. Another pause, longer this time. Then what do you need? When I create the extraction corridor, you're going to be responsible for getting Okafor out. Bellamy and Vance will provide cover, but you will be carrying him. Can you do that? Yes. No Hosetashchin. I can do it. Good. She opened her eyes and scanned the valley. The assault had cost Razavi 9 more men, but had also cost her blood and position. The math was shifting slowly towards something that might be survivable. When I tell you to move, you move. You do not stop. You do not look back. You get him to the wadi, and you follow it north until you reach the extraction point. Understood? Understood. Brennan's voice was steady now, the panic replaced by purpose. Wraith, I do not know who you are or why you're doing this, but when this is over, I'm going to find out. And I'm going to make sure people know what you did here. Linnea felt something crack in her chest, something she had kept frozen since her father's funeral. Do not make promises you cannot keep, Brennan. Focus on surviving the next hour. She ended the transmission and turned her attention back to the valley. Her arm throbbed with each heartbeat, blood soaking through the improvised bandage she had wrapped around the wound. The patient one was repositioning, preparing for another shot. Razavi's reserve force was forming up near the school building. The next assault would be the last. One way or another. She chambered around with her right hand and waited for the storm to break. The silence lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes of nothing but wind and distant bird calls and the soft groans of wounded men on both sides of the valley. Linnea used the time to rebandage her arm, check her remaining ammunition, and study the enemy positions with methodical precision. 29 fighters, one counter-sniper, one commander who had spent 2 years planning her death. She had faced worse odds. Once in a basement in Mosul, surrounded by men who knew exactly who she was and what she had done to their network. She had walked out of that basement. The men who put her there had not. But Mosul had been different. In Mosul, she had only been responsible for her own survival. Here, her lives depended on every decision she made. Her satellite phone vibrated against her hip. Marcus. She answered without taking her eyes off the valley. I have updated satellite imagery, her handler said. You need to see this. Describe it. A pause. Then, in a voice carefully stripped of emotion, there's a convoy approaching from the east. 3 vehicles. Approximately 20 additional fighters. ETA, 30 minutes. Linnea felt the calculation shift in her head, numbers rearranging into a new and uglier configuration. Razavi had not committed his reserve force because he was waiting for reinforcements. The assault she had just survived was not the main event. It was a distraction designed to pin her in place until overwhelming numbers could finish the job. Extraction assets? She asked. Still 40 minutes out, maybe 35 if they push it. The math did not work. It had never worked, but now it was catastrophically worse. Even if she killed every fighter currently in the valley, she would have minutes at most before fresh troops arrived. Minutes to get 4 men, one of them critically wounded, through hostile terrain to an extraction point that might not be secure. Marcus, she said quietly, if I do not make it out of this, I need you to do something for me. Do not talk like that. Listen to me. Her voice hardened. My father kept a journal. It is in a safe deposit box in Helena, Montana. The key is taped behind his photograph in my apartment. I need you to make sure it gets to the right people. The things he wrote about, the operations he was part of before he defected, there are people who need to know that history. Linnea, promise me. Another pause. Then, I promise. But you're going to walk out of there and deliver it yourself. You hear me? She ended the call without responding. Promises were easy. Keeping them was harder. Below, movement near the school building caught her attention. Razavi was reorganizing his forces, pulling fighters back from exposed positions and consolidating them near the main approach routes. He knew about the reinforcements. He was preparing for a final coordinated assault that would hit the SEALs from multiple directions simultaneously. She keyed her radio. Trident 1, we have a problem. Bellamy's response was immediate. We saw dust trails to the east. More company coming? 20 additional fighters. 30 minutes out. Silence. She could imagine the looks being exchanged in that battered compound, the hope draining from faces already pushed past exhaustion. Then Vance spoke, and his voice carried something she had not heard before. Acceptance. Wraith, it has been an honor. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. Nothing is happening next except extraction, she said firmly. I have a plan. Vance laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. Of course you do. What do you need from us? Everything you have left. When I give the signal, I need maximum fire on the southern positions. Every round, every grenade, everything. Make them think you are attempting a breakout to the south. And while they're focused on us, I'm going to kill the 29 fighters between you and the wadi. Then I'm going to deal with the counter-sniper. Then we're going to walk out of this valley before those reinforcements arrive. More silence. Then Brennan. Rafe, that is insane. Probably, she admitted. But it is also the only option we have. She shifted her position, ignoring the fire in her wounded arm, and began identifying targets. The key was speed. She needed to create chaos faster than Razavi could respond, faster than the patient one could track her movements. She needed to become what her father had always said she could be. A force of nature. Unstoppable. Inevitable. 30 minutes. 29 targets. One chance. Try to one, she said on my mark. She found her first target, a fighter crouched behind a low wall who thought he was invisible. Her crosshairs settled on his chest. Linnea thought about her father, about the journal filled with secrets he had carried from one life to another. She thought about Mahmoud Razavi, a teacher who died because she was good at her job. She thought about 8 Marines in folded flag ceremonies and 4 SEALs waiting for salvation in a destroyed compound. She thought about all the people who had underestimated her because she was a woman, because she smiled too easily, because she handed out water bottles and played the role of someone harmless. None of them had ever seen what she could do when she stopped pretending. "Mark," she said, and pulled the trigger. The valley erupted into chaos. Razavi watched from the school window as his carefully arranged positions began to collapse. Fighters were dropping without warning, one after another, killed by shots that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The Americans were firing south as expected, but the real damage was coming from the ridge, from a shooter who was no longer content to wait and react. She was hunting now, actively hunting, and his men were dying faster than he could issue orders. "Find her," he screamed into his radio. "Find her and kill her now." But the patient one did not respond, and somewhere on the western ridge, a ghost was turning into a reaper. 28, 27, 26. Linnea moved and fired, abandoning every principle of concealment in favor of pure aggression. Each shot was a calculation completed in fractions of a second, windage and distance, and target movement processed by instincts her father had spent years cultivating. 25, 24. The fighters in the valley had stopped trying to advance. They were scrambling for cover, firing blindly at the ridge, dying before they could understand what was killing them. Chaos rippled through their ranks like a wave, discipline collapsing under the weight of fear. 23, 22, 21. Her wounded arm screamed with every movement, blood seeping through the bandage and dripping down her fingers. She ignored it. Pain was information, nothing more. Useful for understanding limits, but irrelevant to the task at hand. 20. Trident 1, she transmitted between shots, begin movement to the wadi. Northern approach. Go now, Bellamy acknowledged, and she heard the sounds of the SEALs breaking cover, Brennan's labored breathing as he carried Okafor's weight. Vance was providing rear security, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. She shifted her scope to cover their movement and found 3 fighters attempting to intercept. 3 shots, 3 bodies. The SEALs pushed forward into the gap she had created. 17. A bullet cracked past her head, close enough to feel the displaced air. The patient one, he had been waiting, letting her commit to the aggressive posture, knowing she would eventually present a target he could hit. She rolled left and came up scanning the eastern ridge. There, a glint of glass, a shape that did not belong to the rocks. Tarek had chosen his position well, a natural depression that gave him cover from 3 directions while maintaining sight lines on her most likely firing points. But she was not in a likely firing point anymore. She was exposed, wounded, operating on adrenaline, and something deeper than training. She was operating on fury. Their scopes found each other at the same moment. 2 shooters, separated by 600 meters of empty air, each knowing that the next second would determine who lived and who died. Linnea saw his eye behind the glass. Calm, patient, ready. She saw him begin to squeeze the trigger. She fired first. The bullet took Tarek through the right shoulder, spinning him backward and sending his own shot wide. Not a kill, but enough. Enough to buy time, enough to remove him from the equation while she finished what she had started. 15 fighters remained in the valley. The SEALs were halfway to the wadi, Brennan struggling under Okafor's weight but refusing to slow down. 12 minutes until reinforcements arrived. Linnea descended from the ridge. It was suicide by any conventional measure. A sniper leaving elevated cover to engage at close range, wounded and outnumbered, moving toward danger instead of away from it. But conventional measures had stopped applying hours ago. She hit the valley floor running, rifle up, eyes tracking movement. A fighter emerged from behind a burnt-out vehicle. She shot him without breaking stride. Another appeared in a doorway. He died before he could raise his weapon. 13. 12. The school building loomed ahead, Razavi's command post. She could see figures moving behind the windows, could see the commander himself standing in the doorway with a radio pressed to his ear. Their eyes met across 200 meters of killing ground. Razavi smiled. The expression made no sense. His forces were shattered. His counter-sniper was wounded. His trap had failed. He should have been desperate, should have been running. Instead, he looked like a man who had just won a game no one else knew they were playing. He raised the radio to his lips and spoke a single word. Behind her, Brennan screamed, "Linespon." 3 fighters had emerged from a hidden position near the wadi, cutting off the SEAL's escape route. Bellamy and Vance were engaging, but Brennan had been caught in the open, Okafor's unconscious body pinning him in place. One of the fighters had a pistol pressed to Brennan's temple. Everyone stop. Razavi's voice echoed across the valley, amplified by the same loudspeaker he had used earlier. Drop your weapons, or the young one dies. Linnea froze. Through her scope, she could see the fighter holding Brennan, could see the angle of the pistol, could see the fear in Brennan's eyes as he knelt in the dust with his fallen friend beside him. The shot was possible. Difficult, but possible. 8 inches of visible target at 170 meters. A headshot complicated by the hostage's proximity and her own wounded arm. If she missed, Brennan died. If she did nothing, they all died. Razavi walked toward her, his smile widening. "The ghost becomes flesh," he said. "I have waited so long for this moment. Do you know how many nights I dreamed of watching you die? How many prayers I offered for this exact opportunity?" Linnea kept her rifle raised, her scope fixed on the fighter, holding Brennan. Her finger rested on the trigger, steady despite the blood loss and exhaustion. "Let them go," she said. "This is between us. It has always been between us." "Yes," Razavi agreed. "It has. But you kill my brother, Ghost. My little brother, who never held a weapon in his life. You do not get to dictate terms." The distant sound of engines reached her ears. Reinforcements. Minutes away now, maybe less. Brennan's voice cut through the standoff, cracked with fear but defiant. "Wraith, take the shot. Do not let them win. Take the shot." Linnea looked at the young SEAL, at the life balanced on the edge of her decision, and felt the weight of everything she had done and failed to do pressing down on her shoulders. Her father's voice whispered in her memory, "You must decide what you will use it for." She made her decision. Linnea lowered her rifle. Razavi's smile flickered with surprise. He had expected resistance, negotiation, perhaps a desperate attempt to fight through impossible odds. He had not expected surrender. "Wise choice," he said, gesturing for his remaining fighters to advance. "Perhaps you are not as foolish as I believed." She let the rifle fall to the dust at her feet and raised her hands. Her left arm trembled with the effort, blood still seeping from the wound, but her eyes never left the fighter holding Brennan. "I have a question," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "Before this ends, I need to know something." Razavi tilted his head, curious despite himself. "Ask. Your brother Mahmoud, the teacher, the father of 3. She took a step forward, hands still raised. "Did he ever tell you about his time in Moscow?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Razavi's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping into his features. "What are you talking about?" 1986. Linnea took another step. The Soviet Military Academy. There was a training program, an exchange between your country and theirs. young men with potential, selected for special instruction. Razavi's hand moved toward his sidearm. My brother was never in Moscow. He was. Another step. She was close enough now to see the sweat on the fighter's brow, close enough to see Brennan's eyes tracking her movement with desperate hope. The records were buried, but I found them. Your brother spent 8 months learning from Soviet Special Forces instructors. One instructor in particular. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Viktor Voshchenko. My father. The words hit Razovy like a physical blow. His eyes widened, his hand freezing on the pistol grip. That is impossible. My father defected in 1989. He brought files with him, records of every student he trained. Mahmoud Razovy is in those files. She was 5 feet from a fighter holding Brennan now, close enough to smell the fear radiating off him. My father taught your brother. And now your brother's death has brought us here, to this valley, to this moment. Do you believe in fate, Commander? Razovy opened his mouth to respond, but Linnea was no longer listening. She was watching the fighter, watching his eyes flick toward his commander for guidance, watching his grip on the pistol loosen by a fraction of an inch as confusion disrupted his focus. She moved. Her right hand came down on the fighter's wrist, redirecting the pistol away from Brennan's head as her body twisted into his. The gun discharged into empty air. Her elbow connected with his throat, collapsing his windpipe before he could scream. She caught the pistol as he fell and put 2 rounds into the fighter nearest to Vance. Bellamy and Vance reacted instantly, their training taking over. Vance dropped the 3rd fighter with a burst to the chest, while Bellamy covered the remaining hostiles near the school building. Razovy drew his weapon, but Linnea was already moving, rolling behind the cover of a destroyed wall and coming up with the captured pistol trained on his position. The remaining fighters hesitated, caught between their wounded commander and a woman who had just killed 3 men in 4 seconds. Go, Linnea shouted to the SEALs. Wadi now. I will cover you. Brennan scrambled to his feet, hauling Okafor's unconscious form over his shoulders. Bellamy grabbed the other side, and together they began moving toward the extraction route. Vance provided rear security, his rifle sweeping across the remaining threats. But the senior chief paused at the edge of the wadi, turning back to look at the woman who had saved their lives. In the harsh midday light, he saw her clearly for the first time. Not a ghost, not a myth. A woman, bleeding and exhausted, holding a position against impossible odds so that 4 strangers could escape. Wraith, he called out. What is your real name? She glanced back, and for a moment something softened in her eyes. Linnea. Now go, Senior Chief. Get your men home. Vance held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once, a gesture that carried more weight than any medal or commendation. Come back alive, Linnea. That is an order. He disappeared into the wadi. Linnea turned back to face the valley. Razovy had retreated to the school building, his remaining fighters forming a defensive perimeter around him. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, reinforcements minutes away at most. She should run. The SEALs were clear, the mission accomplished. Marcus would have extraction coordinates waiting, a helicopter that could pull her out before the convoy arrived. Survival was still possible if she moved now. But Razovy was still alive. The man who had spent 2 years hunting her, who had sacrificed dozens of his own fighters to draw her into this trap, who would spend the rest of his life planning the next attempt if she let him walk away. Her father's journal sat in a safe deposit box in Montana, filled with secrets about men like Razovy's brother. Men who had been shaped by violence and ideology, who had become weapons in wars they did not fully understand. Viktor Voshchenko had spent his final years to try to make peace with the things he had done and the people he had created. Linnea did not have the luxury of final years. She had this moment, this choice. She checked the magazine in the captured pistol. 7 rounds remaining. The school building was 200 meters away. She began to walk toward it. Behind her, the SEALs reached the extraction point as the distant thrum of helicopter rotors filled the air. Brennan looked back toward the valley, searching for the woman who had appeared from nowhere and changed everything. He could not see her. She had already vanished into the dust and chaos, moving toward a confrontation that would end in blood, one way or another. The school building smelled of chalk dust and old blood. Linnea moved through the entrance with the captured pistol raised, stepping over the body of a fighter who had made the mistake of standing in the doorway. 6 rounds remaining. Razavi's voice echoed from somewhere deeper inside. You could have escaped. The Americans are gone. Why are you still here? She followed the sound, clearing each room with mechanical precision. Overturned desks, shattered windows, the remnants of a place where children had once learned to read and write, transformed into a command post for men who dealt in death. Because this does not end until one of us is finished, she answered. You know that as well as I do. A bitter laugh bounced off the walls. My brother would have appreciated the poetry. 2 children of violence, taught by the same master, meeting in a ruined school. He always said that education was the only path to peace. Your brother was wrong. Linnea paused at a doorway, listening. Education without wisdom creates more efficient killers. My father understood that. It is why he left. And yet here you are, killing efficiently. The voice was closer now, somewhere to her left. Did Victor teach you to see the contradiction? Or did he pretend it did not exist? She moved through the doorway and found herself in what had once been a classroom. Razavi stood at the far end, his back against a crumbling blackboard, his pistol hanging loosely at his side. He looked older than his photographs, worn down by years of hunting and being hunted. My father taught me that some fights cannot be avoided, she said. Only chosen. I did not choose to kill your brother. He was collateral damage in a strike aimed at men who had murdered civilians. Collateral damage. Razavi's voice cracked on the words. That is what my brother's life meant to you. A line in a report. An acceptable loss. Linnea kept her pistol trained on his chest, but did not fire. I read his file after I learned who he was. He had 3 children. His wife's name was Soraya. He taught mathematics at a secondary school in Tehran before he was recruited into the network. She paused. I know exactly what his life meant. I carry it with me every day. Then you understand why I had to do this. Razavi gestured at the destruction around them. You understand why I spent 2 years building this trap. Not for politics, not for ideology, for my brother. I understand. Her voice softened, but understanding does not change what has to happen now. You killed 9 of your own men today, trying to get to me. You would have killed 4 Americans who had nothing to do with your brother's death. Where does it end, Commander? How many more people have to die before your grief is satisfied? Razavi stared at her, and something shifted in his eyes. The hatred was still there, burning beneath the surface, but it was joined now by something else. Exhaustion, recognition, the weight of a vendetta that had consumed everything he was. It never ends, he said quietly. That is the truth neither of us wants to admit. Your father killed men like my brother and then fled to America to raise a daughter. My brother died in a room full of planners and strategists, and I became one myself. We are all trapped in the same cycle, Linnea. The only difference is which side of the gun we stand on. The sound of vehicles grew louder outside. Reinforcements arriving, too late to save their commander. You could surrender, she said. Face trial. Tell your story to the world. Razavi smiled, and for a moment he looked almost peaceful. We both know that will not happen. I am too valuable dead, too dangerous alive. Your people would never let me reach a courtroom. He raised his pistol. Linnea fired twice. The first round took him in the chest, staggering him backward. The second caught him as he fell, ending any chance of a final shot. He collapsed against the blackboard, sliding down to the floor, leaving a dark smear on the dusty surface. She approached slowly, pistol still raised, watching for any sign of movement. But Kadir Razavi was finished. His eyes stared at the ceiling, already glazing over, his lips moving in what might have been a prayer or a final curse. Linnea knelt beside him. For what it is worth, she said, I'm sorry about Mahmoud. He did not deserve to die. Razavi's lips stopped moving. His chest rose once, twice, and then was still. She remained there for a long moment, looking at the man who had become her shadow for 2 years. He had been intelligent, patient, driven by a grief she understood better than she wanted to admit. In another life, they might have been allies. In another life, his brother might have grown old teaching mathematics to children who would never know war. But this was not another life. This was the world they had been given, built on blood and secrets and the choices of fathers who had tried to shape the future and failed. Linnea stood, checked her remaining ammunition, and moved toward the exit. Outside, chaos reigned. The reinforcements had arrived to find their commander dead and their forces scattered. Fighters ran in every direction, some seeking revenge and others seeking escape. She slipped through the confusion like water through cracks, invisible and silent, making her way toward the extraction coordinates Marcus had provided. The helicopter was waiting at the designated point, rotors already spinning. A crew chief beckoned frantically from the open door, shouting words she could not hear over the engine noise. She climbed aboard and collapsed against the metal floor as the aircraft lifted off. Below, the valley shrank into insignificance, the school building and the compound and the bodies all blending into a landscape of brown and gray. Linnea closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her. 1 mile below, in a destroyed classroom, a dead man's radio crackled with confused reports of a ghost who had finally vanished for good. 3 weeks later, a woman with a healing scar on her left arm returned to the NGO compound carrying boxes of medical supplies. The guard at the checkpoint smiled and waved her through without inspection, the same way they had done dozens of times before. She smiled back, exchanged pleasantries about the weather, and drove her battered truck through the gates as if nothing had changed. Everything had changed. The debriefing at Langley had lasted 4 days. Analysts picked apart every decision, every shot, every moment of the 18 hours that had transformed a routine intelligence operation into something that would never appear in any official record. Marcus had sat beside her through all of it, deflecting the harshest questions, reminding the bureaucrats that 4 American servicemen were alive because of what she had done. In the end, they gave her a medal she would never be allowed to wear and a commendation that would remain classified until long after her death. The director himself had shaken her hand and told her that her father would have been proud. She had not known how to respond to that. The compound looked the same as she had left it. Whitewashed walls, dusty courtyard, the small garden where refugees grew vegetables that reminded them of homes they would never see again. Linnea parked the truck and began unloading supplies, falling back into the rhythm of her cover identity like slipping into a familiar coat. A small figure appeared at the edge of the courtyard, watching her with wide brown eyes. Amira. The girl was 7 years old, orphaned by a war she was too young to understand, living in the compound while the aid workers searched for distant relatives who might take her in. Linnea remembered giving Amira her water ration on the night everything began. It felt like a lifetime ago. "You came back," Amira said, her voice carrying equal parts surprise and relief. "They said you went away. They said maybe you would not come back." Linnea knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "I had something important to do, but I always planned to come back." Amira studied her face with the unnerving perception that children sometimes possess. "You look different. Tired." "I'm tired." Linnea smiled. "But I'm also glad to be here." "Did you take care of the garden while I was gone?" The girl nodded solemnly. "The tomatoes are almost ready. I saved some for you." She took Linnea's hand and led her toward the small plot of earth where green vines climbed wooden stakes. The tomatoes were indeed almost ripe, bright spots of color against the brown landscape. Amira picked one and offered it like a precious gift. Linnea accepted it and took a bite. The taste was sweet and sharp and entirely ordinary, and somehow that ordinariness was exactly what she needed. The world was still capable of growing things. Children were still capable of kindness. Not everything was blood and secrets and the weight of choices that could never be unmade. That evening, she sat on the roof of the compound and watched the sun set over the mountains. Her satellite phone buzzed with a message from Marcus confirming that Deshaun Okafor had been upgraded from critical to stable condition. Brennan had visited him every day since their return to the States, sitting beside his bed and telling anyone who would listen about the woman on the ridge. She smiled at that. Brennan was keeping his promise, even if he did not know her real name or where to find her. The story would spread through the military community in whispers and half-truths, another legend about a ghost who appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps recognition from those who mattered was worth more than medals that could never be displayed. Her phone buzzed again. A different message this time, from a number she did not recognize. She opened it and found a photograph of 4 men standing outside a hospital, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. Bellamy, Vance, Brennan, and Okafor, alive and together, because she had made a choice on a dark night 3 weeks ago. Beneath the photograph, a single line of text: "We remember. Thank you, Wraith." Linnea saved the image to a folder she would never show anyone and deleted the message. Then she sat in the gathering darkness and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Peace. The stars emerged one by one, the same stars her father had taught her to navigate by on cold Montana nights. She thought about his journal, still waiting in that safe deposit box, filled with stories of men he had trained and lives he had shaped. Someday she would retrieve it. Someday she would decide what to do with the secrets he had carried. But not today. Today she was just a woman watching the sky, listening to the sounds of children playing in the courtyard below, remembering that the world contained more than violence and loss. Tomorrow she would return to her cover work. She would hand out water bottles and medical supplies. She would smile at checkpoint guards and play the role of someone harmless. And if another call came in the night, another desperate voice asking for help that no one else could provide, she would answer it. Because that was who she was. That was what her father had made her. Not a ghost, but a guardian. Not a weapon, but a shield. Linnea Vashchenko closed her eyes and breathed in the cool night air. Somewhere far away, a young SEAL named Brennan was telling her story to anyone who would listen. Somewhere closer, a little girl named Amira was sleeping peacefully, unaware that the woman who gave her water had killed 25 men to save 4 strangers. The world kept turning. The stars kept shining. And in the silence between heartbeats, a ghost found rest. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about what moment hit hardest, or tell us about a time someone came through when everything seemed lost.